Okay, chapter 5. What is real estate? Pretty good question, especially since that's the business we're trying to get into, right? Real estate. What is real estate? Well, in this chapter, we're going to identify the different characteristics of real estate, explaining what it is, understanding the differences between land and real estate, and distinguish between the characteristics of what is personal property and fixtures. What are fixtures? So, when it comes to real estate, we're going to learn about the bundle of rights. You know, when I got my real estate license way back in the day, before we got into this section, we first talked about how does real estate work in other parts of the world and how does it work here in the United States? And in some parts of the world, in some countries, you have what's known as the feudal system. The feudal system has kings and queens and emperors and supreme leaders that they actually own the land and they give you permission to occupy it or own it for limited periods of time. You may have to, if you own that land, you may have to farm it and then share the proceeds or profits or food with the supreme leaders or emperors or kings and queens, whatever the leaders are. In the United States, we have what's known as the allodial system. Now, good thing we're not going to have questions on this stuff on exams anymore, I don't think, since it's no longer included in curriculums. But the allodial system is a truer sense of ownership of the land, where even though we own the land, our government still is able to implement laws that we need to follow on how we could use it. They could tax us, even though we own the property, they could impose taxes on us as well. Taxes for the whole country. You know, in the United States, we have our Constitution. Hey, tomorrow is the 4th of July, the birth of our nation. It's not a bad idea for you guys to check out our Declaration of Independence, read through it, and read our Constitution. It's not that big. Hold on a second. I have a small version here, a pocket version right here. The Constitution of the United States. Okay, I got a couple of these handy. Apparently, they give them away at the local libraries and such. This one's coming from Turning Point USA. You know, the one that was created by that guy that they murdered, Charlie Kirk. But it's like a pocket guide constitution. And it tells you what the actual words are and the different amendments and such, and also explains the meaning of it. Very educational stuff. You guys should know this stuff and have one of these handy. Your kid, if you have kids, you definitely should give them one of these because they're not being taught these things in school anymore. They should bring back civics classes, but they're not really teaching them so much. But the bundle of rights are all the rights that you get when you buy land and you own land. Just know that you don't need to study and memorize all the rights here. You just need to understand the concept that when you own land, or real estate, you get these rights that go with it. They're called the bundle of rights. And they include the right of possession or seizin. This is the exclusive right to possess and own the property. Just think of it like in wartime. You have over the millennium, we've had people who have, people go to war with other people and they conquer civilizations, conquer other civilizations, and then they become the owners of the land. You know, there's no place on this planet that has not been conquered by other people. There is no original people. I know we get these, I'm going to call them super woke individuals who are saying that, oh, we took the land from the Indians. It's actually their property. So we need to pay homage to them. Listen, there's no place in this planet. Can you show me one place on the planet where there's the original people still occupying it? Every place, every corner of the planet, there have been tribes that have conquered other tribes. You know, there are countries that conquered other countries, and it's now their land. They are seized of the land, so it's now theirs. Okay. So it amazes me that people today will still argue this, but yet they'll go home and they'll not give up their houses and give them up to indigenous peoples. Okay. It's a high perch to be preaching down to people from. The possession or seizing, that is, you are seized of the land, you are in control of the land, you're in possession of it, it is your property. The right to use the property in any legal manner. The right of quiet enjoyment. That means to enjoy the premises without being disturbed by others. The right of exclusion. That's the right to keep others off of your property and not come onto it. The right of disposition or alienation, to be able to dispose of or alienate the property. Alienation is to give the land, to sell it, to be able to give it, sell it, let it. That means to lease it. And when you do lease property to someone, what are you giving that tenant? You're giving them possession of your property for a limited period of time as defined in the lease, as well as you're transferring all your rights that you have as an owner to that tenant while they're in possession of those premises, except for the right to sell it or give it away. All right. Now you may give them the right, but most leases forbid it, for them to be able to sublease it to someone else. Okay. But that's usually in leases that prevents it. Okay, so those are your bundle of rights right there, or some people refer to it as the bundle of sticks. Okay. Alienation is a transfer of property. That's the simplest definition I could give you, because you're going to see the term alienation used in the mortgage chapters. When we get to that, many lenders put alienation clauses in their mortgage loans that say if you sell the property, the loan needs to be paid off in full. Anytime you sell or give away the property, where the transfer of ownership takes place, the loan needs to be paid off in full. But if you have a loan that does not have an alienation clause in it, that means you could sell or give away the property and not pay off the loan as long as you in full, but you could just still continue making the payments. And in that case, you could give seller financing to someone too. But that's later on. So alienation, the simplest definition is a transfer of property. And this could occur while you're alive or after you're dead. It could be done voluntarily. What does voluntary mean? It's something you wanted. Involuntary, something you did not want, something that's imposed on you. So voluntary alienation examples would be if you sell your property or give it away, you devise it. That means you leave it in a will to somebody after you die. You lease it, license it, or dedicate it. Dedicating land is giving it to the government for a greater public good. Whether you're alive or dead, it doesn't matter. Dedication is when you give land to the government. Now, forms of involuntary alienation would be foreclosure. That's involuntary. You don't want that. That's when your property is taken through the court system because you didn't pay off a debt. Escheat. Escheat is when you die and you do not have a will. So you die what's called intestate, that's without a will, and no heirs can be located. Those are your natural blood relatives that could lay claim to your estate. So the property will revert to the state. So the state escheats you out of your property. Now, nobody's cheating you out of your property. I just like to do a little play on words there. They escheated you out of your property. Nobody's cheating you out of your property. You die without a will. You should have had a will. And if they can't locate any of your heirs and none of your heirs step forward to lay claim to the land, well, the state will sell the property at auction, keep the proceeds in a fund for 1 year, and if nobody claims it, they take your money and they could from your sold estate and do with it whatever they want. Partition is a court proceeding when you have more than one co-owner of a property. You could have a partition proceeding forcing, if one owner wants to sell and the other doesn't, you could take them to, and if they don't want to buy you out or can't afford to buy you out, you're not stuck being an owner with them. You could partition the property. You basically take them to court, and a judge will determine if the property can be physically divided or partitioned. And if it cannot, then the judge will order the property sold, and you'll split the proceeds of the sale according to your ownership interests. And then lastly, we have a suit for adverse possession. Some people refer to this as squatters' rights, even though squatters don't have any rights. This is meant mainly for farmland and such. These are old laws that were put into place to make sure all land that's available for public use is being fully utilized. And most importantly, the tax dollars are being paid for it. So that's another form of involuntary alienation. If somebody is using your property, they're squatting on your property, they're using it, and you did nothing to remove them from the property. If they've been there for a long enough period of time as defined by law, they could take you to court and claim ownership of it. And the judge could grant them ownership if they were using it under certain conditions have to be met in order to win that claim, of course, and we'll get into that later. All right, now within these rights are further rights to improve, devise, that means to leave it by will, mortgage, encumber, cultivate, explore, mine, build, lease, license, dedicate, give away, abandon, share, trade, or exchange the property. So we got some stuff we're going to go over. So here's that same stuff that we just went over in the book. Here's just now your chance to highlight it. The bundle of rights, what those rights are, even though you don't need to study them and know them for exam. Other than alienation, you need to know what that is. Transfer of property. And devise, that's one of those death terms, to leave by will. I'm going to have a whole page coming up in this chapter with a whole mess of death terms. We usually go over them in chapter 20. So after we're done with chapter 5, we're going to skip to chapter 20. It's a small chapter. We'll go over it so we can discuss what happens when you die. How does property transfer? What's involved to make a will? Who could inherit your property and all that good stuff. Okay. Everybody got that? Okay. Oh, there we go. Death terms. So we're going to go over these in chapter 20, even though this is on the chapter 5 slideshow here. I put this together for you. What is an heir? It's a natural blood relative who can inherit belongings of a relative who died. I say natural blood relative. They're your true blood relatives. They were not people who were adopted or foster children or anything like that. They're by blood. Okay. Devise means to transfer or leave property by will in your last will and testament upon your death. So devisor is the person who leaves those belongings to you in their will when they die. And the devisee is the one who's named in a will to receive those belongings. Okay. You can name people in a will to get your stuff that don't need to be your blood relatives, by the way. It's just that blood relatives are the only ones who can claim ownership if they didn't have a will. With the exception of one thing. If you are an adopted child, the adopting parents you can inherit from without a will. You just cannot inherit from their brothers and sisters, your aunts and uncles from your adopted family, because you're not their blood relatives. So you cannot claim to be an heir to get any of their belongings. Now, they could name you in their will to inherit their stuff, but you cannot just claim, even though they treated you like family and you are family, you're not their blood relatives. So under the law, in the eyes of the law, think of like Game of Thrones type of mentality. You are the bastard child. You cannot inherit from the, from the other side unless they specifically name you to receive whatever it is. Okay. Now, demise. Yeah, I know this is like old world stuff. It's like real medieval times kind of laws and rules, but hey, nothing has changed over the centuries, This is the way we transfer things. Now, demise. Oh, sounds like death, doesn't it? Oh, you finally met your demise. Actually, demise is it's not a death term. It's a transfer of property by lease. But do not confuse it with devise. Devise is a transfer of property by will upon death. We already went over that one. I only threw this one here because a lot of people, because they're spelled very similarly, only one letter is different, and they even sound the same, devise and demise. But demise sounds like death, but it's not. It's transfer of property by lease. Devise is the one that's a transfer of property by will upon death. Intestate means that you made a will, you prepared a will of how to dispose of your belongings upon your death. Intestate means you died without preparing a will. A testator is a man who makes a will. A testatrix is a woman, a female who makes a will. These are all, by the way, these terms are Latin. They're gendered terms, okay? Probate is the court proceeding that determines who the natural heirs of an estate are, or to confirm who the devisees named in a will of an estate are. No matter if you had a will or not, and what the assets are after all debts have been paid. Because two things are certain in life, death and taxes, and even when you die, you need to pay your taxes. Before any of your heirs or devisees can get any of your inheritance, your debts need to be paid first, mainly the taxes. So probate is that court proceeding that ensures that all of your debts have been paid, mainly your taxes, or others can step forward and say, hey, they owed me money. I want to get it out of their estate. Okay. An executor is a man, and an executrix is a woman. It's a female. Now, these are trusted people that you name in your will. When you write a will, you have to name somebody to be your executor or executrix. That's the person who's going to read your will and manage the will to ensure that all your final wishes are carried out as outlined in that last will and testament of yours, and your assets are distributed according to your wishes. That's why it should be a trusted person, your brother, sister, family member, close friend. Now, if you don't name anybody in your will to be your executor or executrix, the court will appoint somebody to handle those duties, and it's usually an attorney, and they're referred to as an administrator because you didn't name anybody in your will. The court will appoint an administrator to handle those duties, and they're usually going to do it in exchange for 10% of the assets of the estate. Descent and distribution. Okay, descent, like your descendants. Well, descent and distribution. Every state has their own laws of descent and distribution that dictates who your natural heirs are that can get your assets if you die intestate without a will. So we're going to go over that in chapter 20. That's an interesting read. Sometimes people are very interested in that for whatever reason. Maybe it's something that applies to them now or past or soon. I don't know. But they find that interesting. Escheat is when you die intestate without a will. No heirs can be located. The property reverts to the state. And how does that work? The property sold at an auction, and then the money from that auction is held in a fund for 1 year, in which time your heirs can lay claim to it. And if nobody steps forward and claims it, the state will take your money and piss it away however they see fit. You know, all your personal property, all your most prized possessions and belongings other than your real estate, that's your legacy. It could be your money, it could be your trophies, it could be your bowling ball, it could be your shoe collection, it could be whatever your most prized assets are. That is your legacy. It is the belongings that you have amassed during your lifetime. And the bequest is your wishes, who you wish to get it. Sometimes you hear on TV, maybe when people are reading a will, I bequeath to thee my vast fortune of $4 in my bank account. Okay. The bequest is your wishes of who you wish to get it, and the legacy is your assets that you have left behind. All right, now dower and courtesy is specific to New Jersey. Dower and courtesy are ancient rights that deal with married couples that upon their death, your spouse is entitled to whatever assets you have, or at least they have an interest in all of the assets that you had during your lifetime. Dower, these are gendered terms, dower and courtesy. Once again, dower begins with a doe, and a doe is a deer, a female deer. I know it's spelled differently, but I'm trying to get you a way to remember this because you need to remember which one is the wife's right, which one is the husband's right. Dower is the wife's right because dower begins with a doe, and a doe is a deer, female deer. That's the woman's right. And courtesy is the husband's right because men should be courteous to women. Okay, that's the way I remember them. And it works for me. I don't know if it's going to work for you, but that's the way I remember. So, what is these dower and courtesy rights? Well, it's an ancient right in which the wife has certain interest upon her husband's death. That's dower. In any real estate that he owned during their marriage. And courtesy is a similar right that the husband has in any property that the wife owned during their marriage. Now, New Jersey abolished the creation of any new dower or courtesy rights on May 28, 1980. So, if you were married prior to May 28, 1980, your spouse still has dower and courtesy rights. So this is why we still need to know about this. Now, if you were married after May 28, 1980, there were no new dower or courtesy rights that were created. Marriages after this date, the spouse only has the right of interest in the primary marital residence. And of course, anything you specifically left them in the will. Otherwise, anything else they can leave to their girlfriend. That's a joke. For those who are getting it, maybe you're not getting my humor, or maybe you're just not listening to me. I don't know. I thought it cracked me up sometimes. Anyway, moving along. Here, I put together a couple of resources for you guys. Missingmoney.com. New Jersey used to take part in it. For the most part, they don't, but most other states do. And I guess it really depends what it is, because you could still find things in there from New Jersey. This is a website that is run by the government. They're not going to ask you for a credit card number. Okay. Now, New Jersey pulled out of missingmoney.com and we don't use it anymore. New Jersey, instead, they now created their own website similar to it called unclaimedproperty.nj.gov. I want everybody to write down these resources, missingmoney.com and unclaimedproperty.nj.gov. Look up your name. Look up your relatives' names. You may be owed money and not even know it. Usually I have students look up their names in here and their family and relatives' names. And in just about every single class I've ever taught, at least one person found something. Look at that. And I only charge a 10% finder's fee, okay? I'm not charging anything, okay? It's free. They're not going to ask you for credit card numbers. Let me specify this. You know, you do not have to put in credit card numbers to get access to this. If you do, that's because you did not type this in the address bar. You typed it in maybe the Google search engine bar, and it came back with a bunch of results, and the first ones are actually paid ads. And then when you click on it, you go to some other website, they may ask you for credit card information. Those are scams. Do not enter your credit card info, okay? You don't have to. These are free government-run websites, okay? You do have to put your name, maybe where you're located in there, what state or county, and you can look people up this way. And then if there's anything that comes back, usually they'll tell you what it is. Sometimes they may not disclose the amount of money or what it is that's due to you until you put in additional information like a social security number or fill out a claim form and submit it. Okay, it'll tell you depending on what municipality or county it's coming from. Okay, but otherwise, sometimes they'll tell you right there. Other times you got to put in a claim before they tell you what it is. And often you could do it right there on the website. But tomorrow, let me know if anybody found anything. Okay, let the class know, share it so that we could see that, you know, you found something, you know. I mean, I had a young girl in one of my classes, you know, don't think that you're not going to find anything. Or I had a young girl in my class one time who was in her 20s, and she found something that was owed to her. She used to work at a job in the mall at a company at a store called Hot Topic. For some reason, her boss didn't pay her last paycheck. Instead, he sent it to the state, to the missingmoney.com. That's when we were just only had missingmoney.com. And she found it in there, her last paycheck. So she got a couple $100 that, hey, she didn't even think she was going to get. So, hey, you never know. Missing money. Now it's found. So good luck. Or you may have had a relative that passed away and left something behind that you could lay claim to. Good luck. Okay, guys, anyone want to snap a picture of this slide if you haven't yet so that I can move on? There's a lot of terms and definitions here for you. I assembled all in one place. Okay. So land. What is land? First of all, let me get caught up here. Land refers to the surface of the earth, including water and anything permanently attached to it by nature. Everything extending downward from the surface of the earth to the center, upward into infinity. So this includes subsurface rights. That's including any minerals that are in the ground, not just the area and the space below the surface of the earth, but also any minerals and such that may be in the ground. The gold, the silver, oil, gas, or other minerals. The air rights above the property, and the water rights for any water on the land. A parcel is a specific tract of land with legally defined boundaries that have been maybe defined by a surveyor. That's what a parcel of land is. A specific tract of land that has legally defined boundaries that have been measured by a surveyor on it, and they're mapped out for you. Now, real estate is the same definition of land, but it also includes man-made improvements. Well, what is an improvement? Improvements include both buildings erected on the land, as well as streets, utilities, sewers, paved roads, and other manufactured additions that were added to the property. Note, the concept of real estate also includes any rights that go with the property ownership, those bundle of rights, because that's part of the definition of land too, right? Now, when you get those bundle of rights, we're also going to learn in this chapter or the next chapter, we're going to go over when you sell your property, you could restrict how future owners use the property. And if you do that, those bundle of rights are now limited. And if you buy that property from someone with restrictions on the rights on how you could use that property, they could be attached to restrictions that are there for a certain period of time or based on the happening of a certain event, or they could be there forever. So when you sell that property, you can't create new additional rights or give those rights back to the next owner. What are you selling? You could only sell the rights that you possess, and they may have already been restricted or limited in some way. Oh, look at my own thumb just went up because I'm playing with my thumb here. All right, get rid of it. Oh, it disappeared. Okay, so land, let's do the highlights now about the definition of land. And this is part of the definition of real estate, and write the word bundle of rights down there as well. So there you go. Do these highlights. I had all this stuff on one slide, but we're highlighting what we see in the book now too. Okay, everybody good? Look at that AI photo I made to describe real estate. Real estate's defined as, well, it includes the bundle of rights, possession, control, use, enjoyment, alienation. The surface of the earth, everything permanently attached to it by nature or by people. That includes improvements. Everything below the surface of the land to the center of the earth, and everything above it into space. And all rights, benefits, and interests that go with it, the bundle of rights. So everything below the surface includes the space, as well as any minerals in the ground. They give you example here, oil and gas, coal, gold, minerals. This is supposed to be the center of the earth, I guess, with that light in the center. And then everything above it into space. Although the FAA has exclusive jurisdiction of everything above the highest point of your property, 500 feet above the highest point of your property. So you cannot restrict planes from flying over your house. Because even though you own everything above your property to infinity and beyond, out into space, the Federal Aviation Administration has exclusive jurisdiction over the 500 feet above the highest point of your property. So they could allow planes to fly over. All right, but those drones, you see that little picture of a drone here? that drone, you can restrict it from flying on your property or over your property and, filming stuff, that's your airspace. Okay. You can't have your neighbors can't be flying their drones over your property so that they could see you sunbathing in your bikinis in your backyards and whatnot. Can't be doing that. So the term land and real estate are often used to describe the same thing, but they have important differences in their meanings. Land is the surface of the earth, including water and anything permanently attached to it by nature, which does not require annual cultivation, like grass, trees, bushes, and everything below the surface to the center of the earth, and everything above it to infinity, and the rights, interest, and benefits that go with it. In other words, the bundle of rights. And that's what this picture here is supposed to be describing. And real estate can be described in two ways. Land plus man-made improvements, plus all the rights, interest, and benefits that go with it. In other words, the bundle of rights. Or you could just say land plus man-made improvements, plus the bundle of rights. You'll need to be able to distinguish the difference between land and real estate on your state exam. I know they give you a question about that. So if you want to snap pick, be my guest. Okay, everybody got enough time to do that? Anybody still need more time?
Got it. Thank you.
Okie doke. All right, there's different types of assets. You have tangible assets. Another word for tangible is corporeal. A tangible or corporeal asset is anything you could touch, like buildings, trees, etc. Something you could touch or feel. That's what a tangible or corporeal asset is. An intangible asset or incorporeal asset is something you cannot touch. However, it still may have value to it, like a beautiful ocean view or a mountain view. Can a nice view increase the value of your real estate?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you can't touch a view. You also can't touch a right. So it's an intangible asset. A lease is considered to be personal property. Why? Because you don't own real estate. So the lease is considered your personal property. That is an intangible asset because a lease symbolizes your rights to occupy someone else's property for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. So although you can touch the paper the lease is printed on, the lease signifies the rights that a tenant has to occupy and possess someone else's property for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. So a lease is an incorporeal or intangible asset. It's personal property because you don't own the real estate, and it's intangible because you can't touch your rights. But do you value your rights? Hey, I was watching YouTube videos yesterday. They were showing people that were doing stupid stuff, but as soon as they get arrested, they're like, they really value their rights. Those street lawyers. All right, so let's continue highlighting here the continued definition of real estate, and then here what a corporeal asset or incorporeal asset is. So you want to highlight this and write these little notes down here. A lease is personal property that's an incorporeal or intangible assets. Okay. All right, everybody got that? Anybody need more time? Still writing? I don't know because I can't see most of you on the camera anymore.
Got
Then
it. Thank you.
everybody got this? Okay. So when we talk about your property rights, we're talking about the rights to the property, and rights can be sold or leased independently of the property itself. So it's not ownership of the land. These rights may be owned or leased independently of the land itself, like air rights, like water rights, or subsurface rights, which sometimes are referred to as mineral rights. The mineral rights are to the natural resources lying below the Earth's surface, like the gold, oil, silver, gas, and what other kinds of minerals you could find in the land. Now, air rights are the rights to use the airspace above your land, and they could be sold or leased independently of the land beneath it. Such air rights over railroads may be used to construct large office buildings. One example we give here is Grand Central Station in New York. You got that MetLife building, formerly the Pan American building, above Grand Central Station. You guys ever pay attention to that, or you don't? You keep your eyes level, go here. You don't even look up at the skyscrapers in New York.
I've seen it.
Okay. Well, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency, has exclusive jurisdiction of everything above 500 feet from the highest point of your property owned. So everything 500 feet above that skyscraper. Here's a little interesting factoid for you. In places that are densely populated, like in New York City, you run out of land. So you either got to, you can't build out, you got to build up or down. That's why they got so many skyscrapers there. And because of that, sometimes people build and they sell or lease the air rights above it or below it. You know that the air rights above properties in New York City can be worth as much as 60% of the land itself? That's a whole industry all on its own for those who know about those laws and how to lease or sell them. It's interesting. Here's a drawing that I made of the MetLife building, formerly Pan Am building. Anybody know what Pan Am is? It used to be the largest airline in the world. It no longer exists, but it used to be the largest airline in the world. And that building above Grand Central Station was Pan Am's building. They made it their headquarters. They even have a helicopter landing pad on the roof. That's mostly why they wanted to build it there. They had an idea that was quite genius, actually. You build a skyscraper above a train station. You could have helicopters come in and land on the roof fly people in or out of the city to the local airports. A lot better than trying to take a taxi to JFK or any of those other hospitals. You ever try to do that in New York? Take a taxi to JFK? Oh my God, takes forever, right? All that congestion, or even coming back to New Jersey to Newark for that matter, you know? It is hell driving in and out of New York City there. So they came up with this idea. How about we get these passenger helicopters? They land on the roof, and for a small fee of maybe $25, somebody can fly into the city or fly out to the local airports where they park their cars and what have you. Genius. So what happened? How come they don't do that no more? They used to do it. Oh, well, let's first describe this. In this area, you have the land itself, and there are actually 3 owners of the land, or 3 occupants, I should say. You have at the ground level a bunch of storefronts. Beneath that, you have Grand Central Station, the train station. And then above it, they sold the air rights to Pan Am, who put up this building. But they also needed to sell them small portions of the land itself where they constructed its foundational supports, because buildings don't float in the air. So you got to have small portions of land that go beneath because they pile them into the ground. That would be the foundational supports for the buildings themselves. Here's some pictures of the building. Okay, here's the entrance to Grand Central Station, which is in front of. This entrance is not directly below the MetLife building. It's in front of it, that iconic building. And you got that former Pan Am building. It's now the MetLife building there. Here's the escalators going up to the MetLife building and up to 45th Street. As you can see, there's at the ground level, you got storefronts. See, there's storefronts here. Here's an old drawing, and you can see it from the side, or a model from the side. Here's the Pan Am building, and here's the Grand Central Station, and then that's the entrance to Grand Central Station, and then below the ground, that's the train stations. Here it is before they built the Pan Am building. Here it is during construction. You see, here's where they put the building's foundational supports at each of the corners of the building. That's where the escalators go. Interesting. And then they constructed the Pan Am building. So what happened to it? See, it says Pan Am. That's their logo up there. Now it's MetLife, but used to be Pan Am. So what happened to that genius idea they had? Well, a lot of people didn't think about all the noise that helicopters' whooshing blades make when they come in. Chup, 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 chup. Shook the buildings as they came in. But here you go, you can see them. And here's an actual passenger helicopter landing on the roof or taking off, I'm not sure. Now, this is one style of helicopter. There was another style of helicopter that has landing gear on the sides. Now, the landing gear on the sides was not checked as often as it should be, and it ended up breaking, and one of the helicopters crashed, and it turned on its side when the landing gear broke. You see how the landing gear on this side is still here? Well, on the other side, it snapped and broke off. It had a stress point. It flipped on its sides. The rotor blade smashed into the roof and actually came off the side of the building and smashed in through the windows on the side coming in. But the tires, the landing gear, fell over the side of the building all the way down to the street level. And miraculously, it only killed 1 person on the ground level. Well, I guess technically 2, because she was pregnant. They killed a pregnant lady down at the street level when the landing gear landed on her. And that put an end to the air travel and landing of helicopters on roofs in New York City. There's another even bigger helicopter that was coming in with 2 blades. Good idea. That came to an end on May 16th, 1977, when that helicopter toppled over on top, killing 5 people. That's a little history lesson there of that. All right. Let's start thinking out of the box now. Because now you could own the land and then lease or sell your rights individually of the land. So, how do you suppose this got built? By the way, just beneath this is the street, is a public street. How did they connect 2 buildings with this catwalk like that? Can you just build over a public street? So how did they build this? Maybe they bought or leased the air rights from the city so that they could put that there. Or maybe it's the same owner that owns this building and that owns this building that are connected. And maybe they owned all the land beneath it. That after they constructed these buildings, they kept the air rights, but they sold the street, the land. Maybe they dedicated it to the city that they could use it as a street. We're just spitballing ideas out there. I have no idea. I'm just spitballing some ideas out there, just so that we can start thinking outside of the normal box. Because usually when you think you own real estate, you own everything, right? But you could actually sell the air rights or keep the air rights and dedicate, meaning giving away the land to the municipality to use for a public good like streets, schools, and parks. All right, now we're going to learn about water rights. Okay, when we talk about water rights, it could be dealing with the use of the water and being able to use the water and all. But in this regard here, we're not going to talk about it in that regard. We're going to be talking about what do you own when you own land that either borders water or has water on it. What exactly do you own? Well, water rights generally are not about the rights to use the water, but talk about what the landowner actually owns when they own land that borders water or has water on it. So the water rights could be littoral or riparian. What is that? Well, land bordering on oceans, seas, or large lakes affected by tidal currents is known as littoral. Think of littoral begins with an L. Think of lakes and large bodies of water. Land that is bordered or traversed by a stream or river or waterway is known as riparian. So think of like little streams and rivers. Don't think about like the raging Mississippi. Think about like little streams or rivers, those are riparian property rights. They begin with an R, so does a river. So, littoral property rights, you own land that borders large bodies of water like the ocean. Riparian property rights, little flowing rivers and streams and waterways. Now, the key to identify what kind of property rights you have, that's only part of the definition there. If the stream is identified as not navigable on a federal survey map, its bed is owned by the owner or owners of the adjoining land, who have certain riparian rights that allow them to use the water. Okay, so let me put it in plain English. If you own land that borders large bodies of water like the ocean that are controlled by the tides, you got high tide, you got low tide. Like when you go to the beach, you ever see the stain in the sand, high tide, that's where the water used to be up to. Low tide, the water's gone. You can walk there now, but you still see the stain in the sand where the water went up to. Okay? If you own that beachfront property, you only own the land up to that stain in the sand where the water is at high tide. You don't actually own out into the water. If you have riparian property rights and you own land that has a lake, a pond, or a river or brook or stream running across it, you actually could own the water. You could actually own the land under the water. You own the land that the water is sitting on. Now, the key to it is determining if it is riparian or littoral property rights. Riparian rights, you actually own the land under the water. Littoral rights, you only own up to the high water mark. But what determines that? Well, is the waterway navigable or not? Meaning commercial shipping can go through it. I'm not talking about like your little wave rider or kayak. I'm talking about commercial shipping, large, like super freighters and tankers and cruise ships and things of that nature. That will determine what do you actually own? Okay. So riparian rights, an owner can own the land which the water is sitting on or running across. Littoral rights, the land is owned only up to the mean high water mark of navigable waters, controlled by the tides. So littoral borders navigable waters and riparian borders non-navigable waters. Littoral, you only own the land up to the high water mark. Riparian, you actually own the land under the water. And if two properties are separated by a stream, each property owner owns the land under the stream up to the center of the stream. Like you see here in this diagram in the book. Riparian property rights, if two properties are separated by a stream that's non-navigable, each property owner owns the land under the water up to the center of the stream. If those waterways are navigable, littoral, you only own the land up to the edge of the water, up to the mean high water mark. The mean is the average. So here's a slide for you to take a picture and screenshot of. It gives you all the definitions about water rights, which can be quite confusing and you will need to study because they will be on both exams. You need to know what littoral and riparian is. You need to know the word avulsion, erosion, accretion, alluvion, and reliction. I told you these exams are mostly terms and definitions. These are your water rights ones. I know you took a real estate class, not a science class, but you know what? Sometimes you sell real estate that's on the water or near the water. Maybe it is on a lake or river or has a pond on it. So if that's the case, you need to be familiar with water rights. Does the landowner have littoral or riparian property rights? What does it matter? Well, littoral, you only own the land up to the high water mark. Riparian, you actually own the land underneath the water. You could actually put a dock in the water that you own because you own the land under the water. Now, this is not getting into any of the environmental stuff where you got to get permission from the EPA or DEP, because when you start messing around with water or doing construction near water, you got to worry about, is this going to affect the ebb and flow of the tides? Is this going to affect any wildlife habitat or the fish or anything like that? That's a different argument altogether. That's a different topic. Let's just talk about, do you have the right to put a dock in the water? Do you own the land under the water that you could do so? Well, what would determine that? Well, if you have riparian property rights, you could. Those are non-navigable waters. If you have littoral property rights, you may not be able to do that. Those are navigable waters that commercial shipping goes to. So now we know how to identify. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So a lake, so if your house is on a lake, so the water goes with the tide in the lake. But the only boats that are in there are like if people have paddle boards and that kind of stuff.
Well,
But there is,
what kind of lake are you talking about? Not all lakes have high tides or low tides. The tide never goes up. I mean, the
I'm just
water.
thinking,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm thinking about the lake. So my sister has a house on a lake, and the water there is some tide in the water, and you
Well,
can put a boat
well,
there, like a
you
paddle
you have
boat.
you have water movement. You have water movement that you see from the wind all the time. But does the water
Well, it
level?
actually goes out.
What,
It changes.
okay. Okay. So
And and there's a dock. So
okay.
she owns the land under the lake.
Does
There's a dock?
commercial does commercial shipping go through the lake?
No,
Commercial.
no.
Okay, then she has riparian property rights, so she could possibly own the land under the water. Yes, it's a possibility.
And the
You'd have to,
only benefit to that would be that you could put a dock there.
correct.
Right out that's it, right? I mean, there's nothing else you can do there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But determining whether you could put that dock there or not would depend if it's navigable waters or not. You know,
No,
navigable waters
nothing commercial.
they're usually controlled by the tides. It goes up and down, but the main difference of really identifying if it's navigable is littoral is if the waters are navigable, meaning commercial shipping, like super freighters and cruise ships go in there. You know, not your little pleasure boats and such. We're talking about like the big ships, commercial shipping.
Yeah, no, they don't go on there.
Which is the case in places like, we got the Lake Michigan and those lakes up on the New York border over there. Those ones, some of them have really rough waters, and they definitely have high tide and low tide. Commercial shipping definitely goes through those. So those are littoral property rights over there. It depends, it really depends on that. You'd have to determine if they're navigable or not. Okay, so now let's learn some more sciencey words for water. The term avulsion. What is avulsion? Avulsion is the sudden change of the course of a stream by the violent and sudden tearing away of the land. If that happens, the property line would not change. It would remain where it previously was. You could even build the land back up where it was torn away from. Because water moves. Water's fluid. Lakes, streams and rivers, if you notice, they're not straight. They bend. They have bends in them. And sometimes when they bend, let's say we get a lot of rain, it overflows them. The water flows faster. It doesn't want to go around the bends as much, so where you see a curve, the water hits harder that land next to the curve, and sometimes it breaks through it, and the water now flows a more direct route. Water still flows through the bend, but it's mainly now going through the direct route. And that bend over there sometimes creates a small lake, what's known as an oxbow lake. Okay. I'll show you some pictures I made in AI over that, and some that I've downloaded that explains that. But either way, avulsion is the sudden change of a course of a stream. That's all you need to know for exams. It's when the stream suddenly changes its course. So if two properties are separated by a stream, and the center of the stream becomes their property line, if the stream changes its course and starts running in a different direction, the property line does not move. It remains where it always had been. Erosion is not a sudden change. It's a gradual, slow change over time where the wind and water wears away at the land. That's erosion. Accretion is the opposite of erosion. Instead of the water wearing away at the land, the water actually deposits additional soil. So it's the opposite of erosion, where the water wears away the land. Accretion is where the water deposits additional soil. Accretion is the process of the actions of the water gradually increasing the land by depositing solid material. You know, the sand, rock, dirt, or soil. Alluvion is what you call that solid material that the water deposited, whether it's the sand, rock, dirt, or soil. That's referred to as alluvion in science terms. That soil or sand that was deposited there by the water is called alluvion. So if you look at the words avulsion and alluvion, alluvion has two L's and avulsion has an S for sudden change of a course of a stream. Alluvion has two L's. Alluvion is what you call the dirt that was deposited by the water. So think of it, when you see these two words next to each other, they look almost identical. They both have the A's, L's, U, V, I, O, N in them. So on exams, it's easy to get confused. Here's an easy way to remember it. The one that has an S in it is for sudden change of a course of a stream. So that's the one that suddenly changes the course. Alluvion is the one that has two L's. You gain an L, you gain some dirt. So that's the way I remember that one. The one that has two L's is the one where you're gaining the dirt. And alluvion is what you call that dirt that's been gained. See, I even wrote it like that. Yeah, I didn't even put Y-O-U. Alluvion has two L's. Gain an L, you gain some dirt. And the last word we have here is reliction. Reliction begins with an R-E, just like the word receding, just like my hairline is receding, right? So we have the reliction begins with an R-E, like receding. It's like a permanent receding of the tides, okay? Where the tide goes out and does not come back. Wait a minute. Don't we have all these people telling us that the sea levels are rising and we're all going to be underwater by 2050? How impossible. The water never goes out and doesn't come back. Are you sure? Are you guys familiar with a little place called the Meadowlands? Years before any of us were ever born, that was all underwater. It's not man-made, but naturally the water went out. The tide went out and it never came back. Now we have a ground that's exposed there. We have stadiums, we have highways, we have malls, we have shopping centers there, we have an airport there. That's natural, that's Mother Nature. That's a perfect example where the tide went out and it never came back. And it wasn't man-made, it wasn't man that did that. How did that happen? Well, you know, the earth is not round. Okay, I'm not a flat earther. I'm just saying the planet is not a smooth surface. We have mountains, we have high mountains, and we have valleys and canyons. So we have high points and we have low points. Sometimes we have earthquakes and the tectonic plates shift under the water. And when that happens, maybe there's a canyon that's underwater that forms, and the water goes out and fills that gap. It's not going to come back. Not unless there's a major shift in the land underneath the water that causes the sea level to rise. It's not because of the melting polar ice caps. Because as we learn, ice caps melt, but then the ice comes back again, like it has. So those people that say that the sea levels are rising and it's going to again, well, how do you explain that all the polar ice caps have more ice in them than they did before again? Are we having another ice age? No, it's global warming. You notice they don't use the term anymore, global warming. They actually changed the definition. Now they all refer to it as climate change. Wait a minute, all this happened in less than 10 years and went from global warming because of using of gas appliances and vehicles that now we call it climate change? What happened? Well, they saw that all the ice came back. We can't call it that no more. Let's come up with another reason. Let's call it climate change. Climate's always changed. We got 4 climate changes here, right? We got 4 seasons, right? So we have hills, we got valleys, we got mountains. The earth is not a perfect sphere. So some places the sea levels are rising, some places they're falling. Look at the Statue of Liberty. When was the Statue of Liberty gifted to us? Look at this, look at the old pictures when that was first put there. And look at the pictures today. Sea level has not risen or dropped anywhere around it. How do you explain that? Look at California. California looks like the sea levels have risen. In a later chapter, a little bit later on, is it this chapter? Yeah, no, it's a little bit later on in another chapter. I'm going to actually show you pictures over periods of time. In California, the sea level has not risen. The ground sunk because of their, they're near desert. They got a very hot climate. They get droughts of water. They don't collect it. They just let it run back out to the ocean. So what do they use for irrigation for their crops and their farms there? They use water from wells. Wells pull the water out of the ground that fills the gaps between the dirt particles. And when you empty the water out of the ground, think of the ground like a sponge. It has all those little holes in it. When it's full of water, it's stiff. You squeeze it, you empty the water out, it's easier to push on the sponge. And what happens is the ground collapses. Those little gaps collapse and the ground level sinks. I'm going to show you where the ground level sunk in California, about the size of a telephone pole. You know the height of a telephone pole? That over the years, the ground sunk by that much. It's the craziest thing. Hey, but that's science. Most of us don't pay attention to this stuff, so we automatically think because the ground is so low to the ocean, it seems like the sea level rose. Actually, no, the ground used to be up here, but it shrunk down here. It dropped, it sunk. So it's quite interesting. If you actually trust the science, then you should really look at the science. So these are some of the sciencey words that we had to learn about, and you will get them on exams, so you should study them. And I got these definitions here for you that explain it, hopefully in a good way. I'm going to change the slide now. If anybody didn't take a picture of it, take a picture or a screenshot if you didn't yet, because I'm about to change the slide, okay? Don't worry, we'll see it again. I got it coming up again, that same slide. Okay, so here we could just highlight those terms in the book now. Here's where avulsion is, accretion, erosion, reliction. Now, these memory tips that the book gives suck, okay? Like, memory tip, when you see avulsion, the sudden change of the course of a stream, think of convulsion. Convulsions occur suddenly and not gradually, hence avulsion equals convulsion equals sudden change. Say what? Tip to easy remember. What the hell did they just say there? Okay, here's another memory tip that when they did the last rewrite of this book, they put these memory tips in here, and they're so, some of them are so stupid. Memory tip, accretion is the creation of land. Yeah, it is. I guess accretion sounds like creation, accretion. Memory tip here, let's see, when you see reliction, think of a popsicle. As you lick the popsicle, the stick emerges through the process of relicking. I don't know how that makes it easier to remember. Yeah, I like the reliction begins with RE, the word receding. That's the receding of the tides. It recedes like my hairline, you know. The water recedes and it doesn't come back. Okay. It's like a permanent receding of the tides, reliction. It's either the permanent receding of the tides or all the water drying up, evaporating the water, giving you more dry land. It's not creating any new land. That land was always there. It was just underwater. So either the tide went out and didn't come back, or it could be the water in a pond or lake that dried up, and now you have more usable land. Those are the two ways that reliction creates more usable land. It's not creating new land, it's just making it usable because the water dried up or the tide went out and didn't come back. That's why I had you right here at the end of this sentence. Exposing land, not creating it. A permanent receding or water evaporating / drying up. Everybody got that? Anybody still writing, highlighting, and writing? Remember, there's this little sentence down here to write.
I got it.
Yep. If anybody need more time, just let me know. So once again, littoral. Here's a picture. You got the ocean. You got navigable waters here. You got a commercial ship there. If you have beachfront property, you only own the land up to the edge of the sand during high tide. That mean high water mark. The rest underneath the water is publicly owned. Once again, here's this slide if you needed it with all those terms: littoral, riparian, avulsion, erosion, accretion, alluvion, reliction. If two properties are separated by a stream or river, and that river is navigable, then you only own up to the edge of the water. If it's non-navigable, each property owner owns up to the center of the stream, the land up to the center of the stream. Now, when two properties are separated by a stream, the center of the stream would be the property line. So here's that property line down the center of the stream. So both properties would own up to the center of the stream. Now, if that stream were to change its course through avulsion, then the property line would not move. It would remain where it had always been. Stays there, even though the stream now starts going this way and that way. Here's another example of explaining avulsion. You see how this stream goes back and forth, this river or stream goes back and forth, back and forth. Well, after a flood event, it kind of cuts through the land a little bit. You see there's not as much back and forth. it became more of a straight line because it ripped away the land in certain areas. So it's not so much back and forth here of a slow flowing stream, because after a flood, it busted through some of that land and broke it away. And even though it's got some back and forth to it, it's straighter. So when a stream suddenly were to change its course, if this happens, the property line would not change. The boundary, so if the property line was here, and now the river has a new path going this way instead of this way, the property line still remains where it had been. Looks like over here, the stream was flowing over here. Now it's dried up over here because to cut a new path, it's running in this direction. Here, I have a simple drawing. The original stream goes this way, but now it suddenly changed its path. It goes this way. The property line doesn't move. The stream remains, the property line remains where it always had been. This is actually a little animated video I'm going to play for you. Here is a real example of a river changing its course. Now, what causes, when a river moves and it changes its course of where it is, we call that meandering. Meandering, you meander along, you're moving along, right? So here's actually a time-lapse video from satellite starting from 1990 here. Now, where is this? I have it down here. So the 2004 avulsion of the Manambolo River in western Madagascar is showing this animation created from a false color satellite image, whatever that means. Upstream of the avulsion site, the river is about 1 kilometer wide. Vegetation is highlighted in bright green. Okay, so let's click on it and let's watch it in its animated form as it changes. Up top, you could see the years change. And here you're going to see how the water changes its flow. You see how it changes? It's running here, it's running there, then all of a sudden it starts going straighter out here. That's a real life example how over the years the water cuts a different path. And this river is 1 mile wide or 1 kilometer wide. Sorry. So it does happen. All right, here is erosion. At Tom's River, they're putting in these erosion fencing to try to prevent, during storm season, the water pulling the sand out into the ocean. Otherwise, it's going to wear away at the land a lot. Here's accretion where the water deposits soil, but this isn't in a positive way here. This looks like during a storm. Look how much sand gets deposited, blocks in. Look at this guy. He's walking through the deeper sand that has been deposited. Here, it deposits it so much it destroys the buildings. Accretion and alluvion. So here it's building up land, and here it's changing. Well, the soil is deposited there. Here's Sandy Hook. You know Sandy Hook is growing in size. Anybody ever been to Sandy Hook Beach? Sandy Hook, the hook is actually growing. Why? Because you got the Atlantic Ocean on the outside, and on the inside, you got water from the bay. And as that water comes in and around, it swirls around and puts up the dirt. It deposits alluvium building up. It gets thicker over here and it gets longer over here. It's actually getting built up. It's getting longer. Haha. Anybody ever watch Netflix? You watch Ozark? Anybody ever see that show on TV called Ozark? Okay, it's a show on Netflix about this guy was an accountant, pretty smart with the numbers. This lady's an attorney. She works for a drug cartel, kind of forced into it. And then you have another guy sitting at a table here. He owns land and he grows poppies. Basically, they're using it to make their heroin or whatever it is they make out of the. They're all bad guys, you know, dealing with drugs and stuff like that. But it's interesting how this program talks about certain real estate terms like eminent domain, and they talk about water rights. And so I thought that, hey, let's use this in class. Let me show you how they use this. So these terms, you'll see them in movies all the time. They probably go right over your head because you weren't paying attention. But now you're learning them. Next time your ear is going to be a little bit sharper. You're going to hear, wait, riparian, littoral, eminent domain. You guys know what eminent domain is? Eminent domain is when the government can take your land if it's needed for a greater public good. But you need to be justly compensated. They have to pay you what it's worth. Now, they're not going to pay you some ridiculous pie in the sky high number that you pull out of thin air. They're going to pay you whatever it's going for, what the going rate is for the land. But they're going to take it from you and you're not going to have a choice in it if it's needed for a greater public good. We would not have modern society without eminent domain. That's how do we build highways, to put entrance and exit ramps, to build tunnels. It crossed somebody's land. You guys love that abundant, clean, natural gas that gets delivered to your house that you could cook with, and that heats your home, that heats your dryer and laundry, so you could do your laundry and keeps you warm in the winter? Or do you prefer oil heat that has to get ordered and delivered to your house? Okay. Well, that natural gas has pipes that come through the ground. They come all the way from refineries, and that natural gas has to cross over people's land to get to your house. And without having eminent domain, not everybody would allow the pipes to go over their property. So if they don't allow that, the city, state, or utility companies have the power of eminent domain that they could take your property because they need it, and they'll just pay you for the value of the land. All right, let's take a look at this little clip here. Silence the videos and let's see how they use it.
Jacob? Excuse me if I don't shake your hand.
I'm fine skipping pleasantries.
Let's make this ultra brief. The Almighty himself did not convince us to lift our blockade.
What about the federal government? You know who I spent the morning with? Your friends over at the power company. I wanted to know how it was that they were able to get your ancestors off of their land so quickly back in 1929.
No mystery there. Lies, theft, intimidation.
Well, they got an assist from a little thing called riparian rights.
Army.
Riparian rights are the laws that say who owns land under a body of water. It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, whoever stops to consider the land under a lake, or in this case, the Missouri River, which last time I checked was a federal waterway. What this means, Jacob, is that the instant you flooded your land and connected it to the Missouri, you ceded all of that flooded land to the U.S. government.
Which is how I managed to obtain this written order. guaranteeing our workers access to the vote. Now, if you defy this order, we can have the U.S. Marshals escort them.
And the land that you need for access roads and parking lots to get the people to your precious vote. We own all of it. What's to stop us parking cars all around the water's edge?
Eminent domain. The feds are going to give all the surrounding land to our business partners to build shopping malls and hotels and, yes, access roads because it's in their financial interest. The tax revenue from said development is going to be massive, just like it was in 1929. They own it all. Above, around, and below.
The moment he was broken.
There's some bad here, but I don't feel much like praying.
All right, I don't need to show any more of this. If you're interested, you can watch it. It's Ozark. It's this is from season 2, episode 9. I don't want to spoil anything else for you if you have not seen it yet. I don't want to put any spoilers out there, but this is enough to get you piqued in your interest involved in it. It's actually pretty interesting, but it's a very violent show, just so that you get a heads up and know about that. The very first episode sucks you in, and you're going to watch at least a season just because of the first episode. If you're into those shows that have gangsters and violence and it's pretty bad though. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this episode because they were talking about water rights and eminent domain. And as a teacher, my ears are always on for real estate terms, just so I could show you examples. And this was a perfect example that they explained it and they tied things in together of how government can actually be used. These are a bunch of gangsters. They're all bad people here. How they're using the government and the laws on their side to take away this guy's property. In this example, using the law. So, politicians are no different. They take away people's land all the time. And then they turn it over to a developer who builds hotels or puts up car dealerships. I mean, tell me New Jersey's not the king of the most used car dealerships and new car dealerships you've ever seen in any other state. It's like we're the diner capital of the world, but we're also the capital of like used car dealerships too, and new car dealerships. And how do they get these properties? Well, they have their buddies over in City Hall, in the redevelopment areas, working for the different departments of government. They're able to take property by eminent domain, and then they turn it over to their developer buddies, who then reimburse them for any money they put out to get the property by eminent domain, and then they use it for whatever they want. See, you don't need to have the power of eminent domain in order to take someone else's property by eminent domain. You just need to know who does have that power, chummy up with them, become buddies with them, tell them how it's in their best interest to use their power of eminent domain to take that property and turn it over to you, in which you'll reimburse them for taking that property that the owner didn't want to sell to you.
So what would happen if he never flooded out the river then? Would that technically still be his property?
Well, he flooded his land with the river. If you were to watch the show, the reason why he did that is because they had an area, they're bad guys, and they killed a lot of people and they buried them in that area of the town or that area of his property. And they got a heads up that the feds were going to be raiding his property. So they kind of like blew up an area that blocked where the land was, that prevented the river from flowing in there, so that they got the water to flow over that land so they would never discover it, but the thing is, when he flooded his own land, this guy, he's a genius, he came up with this idea. He went down there to find out why the power company was able to take his ancestors' land. And then he put 2 and 2 together and figured out, hey, by flooding it, he ceded all that land to the government. So he informed the government that happened, and now that's their land. So now they could use his property, which he didn't want them to use anymore. He tried cutting ties off with them. So there's a bigger story around it, you know. But that's why. If he never flooded that land, his land with the river, then it would still be his land. But now his land is sitting under the river, and because that river is a waterway, that became public land now because it's the Missouri River is it's actually not riparian rights. The Missouri River is actually it's got navigable waters. So it became public. He does not own the land under the water because it's navigable waters now. So he ceded all that land. So
Are people compensated if their land is taken by eminent domain?
yes,
They are.
yes, just for the value of the land, correct. But he said he didn't want him. He didn't want them going on the land. He's like, we'll park guards all around the river, prevent you. He's like, well, no, the feds will give us the land. They're going to take it by eminent domain, and then they'll give it to us. Because what the whole deal behind this is they have this river boat that they bought. He's trying to find creative ways to launder the cartel's drug money and basically clean it. And they need some sort of legitimate business. So he comes up with this idea to have a river boat and have a casino on it. And a casino is a good way to launder money and clean it. So that's how they. This is just one of his ideas of many. For how to launder the cartel's money. But there's a lot of drama behind it and many episodes. So this is just part of the drama of the show. Interesting, though. All right, frontage. We learned that frontage is the width of the front of your lot. It's the side of your lot that faces the street. Of course, unless you have waterfront property. And then by definition, where's the front of the property? On the water side, water front, beach front, ocean front. You ever hear people talk about that? They mention it that way. Lakefront property, oceanfront property, beachfront property. That's different than regular frontage, which is facing the street. Because the more valuable side is on the water side. So here's where your normal frontage would be. If you have a waterfront property, well, you measure how much of it is touching the water. Because that's the more valuable side. And people love to play. You know, you got the water, you're on the water side, that's the more valuable side. Anything that can be inherited is called a hereditament. That's how you pronounce that word, hereditament. No, it's hereditament. Okay. I know these are new words. We never heard them before, but it kind of sounds like inherit, right? Hereditament, inherit. You could get that. You could guess that one right if you got it on exam. So you're not going to get it on exam. Oh, wait, let me correct myself. You'll see it on exams, probably as one of the wrong answer options because they use real words on the exam. But they're not going to ask you what a hereditament is, you know. But just for me to explain it, a hereditament is anything that can be inherited. Chattel or chattels. Sometimes you see it with an S, sometimes without. This is a word you need to know. Add it to your definition list. It'll be on both exams. Chattel or chattels is tangible personal property. Don't get lazy and say chattel is personal property because that would be wrong. Because there's also intangible personal property. Chattel is specifically tangible personal property. What does tangible mean? It means you could touch it, you could feel it. Like my cell phone. My cell phone is tangible. I could touch it, I could feel it. It's tangible. Okay? A building is touchable. You could feel it. It's tangible. Your rights are intangible personal property. Like with a lease, right? So chattel is tangible personal property that's usually movable and not attached to the real estate. Like your furniture in your house, the washing machine and dryer, the refrigerator. Those are personal property. Those are chattel. So highlight tangible personal property is referred to as chattels, chattel or chattels. It's on page 97. See, here's some examples. Real estate is land and anything permanently attached to it. Personal property could be movable items like your car, or in this case, a tractor. Movable items not attached to real estate, or items severed from real estate, like a tree. A tree is part of the real estate. You cut down the tree, severing it from the earth through the process known as severance. It's now considered personal property. Now you could sell it as a Christmas tree, for example, right? Fixtures are the opposite. They're items that are personal property, but you attach them or fix them to the property in such a manner that they become part of the real estate, like this mailbox or a chandelier. You go to the store, you buy a chandelier, it's personal property. It's still in a box, right? Chandelier is personal property. But now you bolt it to the ceiling, you hardwire it to the electrical, it's now part of the real estate. Same thing with the toilet and your sink and your kitchen cabinets. Those are fixtures. They were once personal property that have been affixed to the property in such a manner they become part of the real estate. Trade fixtures. Trade means a business. You guys are here to learn a new trade, right? This is a trade school. We're teaching you a new trade. Trade is a business. Business fixtures. See how I'm translating them in my head as I'm reading it to you? A trade fixture is a business fixture. It's an item that is personal property that's attached to the real estate, but it's not part of the real, it's not considered to be part of the real estate because it's used to conduct a business. So it's still, even though it's attached to the real estate, it's still considered personal property that can be removed by the business owner if they remove it before the lease expires. If the lease expires and they did not remove it, that trade fixture becomes a fixture, and fixtures are part of the real estate and owned by the property owner. So is it possible for a trade fixture to become a fixture? Yes, if it's not removed before the lease expires. That scenario is often used as an example. So you need to know what is a fixture, what is a trade fixture, and what kind of property is it? And is it possible for a trade fixture to become a fixture? Oh, how do we transfer real property, real estate, and how do we transfer the ownership of personal property? Real property ownership is transferred by some document called a deed. Personal property is transferred by bill of sale, right? You go to the store, you buy some clothing, they give you a receipt, that's your bill of sale. Now, leases are considered to be personal property that's an intangible asset because a lease symbolizes your rights of a tenant to occupy an owner's property for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. You cannot touch a right, therefore it's an intangible asset. The renter does not own the real estate, so it's considered personal property. A definition that clear is nowhere in this book. You see a couple definitions that could get to that conclusion, but this is the clearest definition. So if you want to write it in your notes, just snap a picture of it now and add it to your notes later, that definition of a lease and what kind of property it is. And highlight down here that real property ownership is transferred by deed, personal property by bill of sale. All right, everybody got it? Need a second? Okay. Just let me know when you got it. Say something though, because I'm not looking at everybody's cameras.
Got it.
Anybody else need more time, or everybody good?
I got it.
I got it.
Here's another slide where I got a bunch of explanations and definitions for you. One place that makes it more convenient than all the different highlights. I have a definition of what corporeal and tangible mean. These are assets you could touch and feel. Incorporeal or intangible assets are based on things like your emotions or views or your rights of interest, like stocks or leases that have value. Chattel or chattels is tangible personal property, usually movable and not attached to the real estate. A deed is the document used to transfer real property ownership, where a bill of sale is used to transfer personal property ownership. Severance is the process of transforming real property to personal property, like with a tree. You cut down the tree, severing it from the earth, now it's personal property. Otherwise, emblements, that's a term you need to know as well. These are things like annual crops that do not come back and grow on their own unless you till the soil, plant the seeds, and care for the plants again. You know, grass, bushes, trees. These are the items that come back every year on their own. You don't have to plant seed and they grow, they continue to grow. Emblements are things you have to plant the seeds for every year in order for those crops to grow. So they're considered to be personal property. So if you sell your property, you could take your emblements with you. Okay. Now, let's think about a farmland, though. A tenant farmer, one who is renting the farm that does not actually own the land, if the farm is sold, they're allowed to continue maintaining, working the farm until the crop is ready to be picked, and they pick the harvest and then sell it. Okay, so a tenant farmer is allowed to return to pick the fruits of their labor, so to speak, and that's their crops. Their crops are not going to come back again next year unless they tilled the soil and planted the seeds again. So emblements are considered personal property, like those crops, or vegetables and such, or even flowers that don't come back every year. As a matter of fact, I had a girl in one of my classes who was buying a house while she was taking this class. And she was like, tomorrow I got to take off because we got the closing. And then the next day, or later on that day, because she came to class after the closing, she said, oh, I can't. She's like, this lady's too much. I don't even want to talk about it. And then she ended up telling us what it was. She said, I bought this house. It is beautiful. The grass, the lawn, the landscaping is meticulously maintained. I mean, this lady's out there with scissors trimming the grass around the edges, you know, and she's out there. When I go there to do the final walkthrough, she was out there on her hands and knees, digging up the flowers and pulling them out of the ground and putting them in pots. And she's like, oh, I just can't with this lady now, you know. And I was like, well, what kind of plants are they? They're the kind that you got to plant every year, or you know, they die during the winter and you got to plant every year, or are they the annuals that are there, or perennials that are there year round? And she's like, no, they're the kind you got to plant every year. And I was like, well, then, you know, don't stress yourself out. It's not a big deal. You know, they were going to die anyway during the winter. You know, it's just that you have to deal with not having them there when you first move in, because the lady's digging them out of the ground and taking them with her. I was like, that's kind of such. But I guess they could be considered emblements. So I was like, you know, it's not even worth the argument. All right, fixtures are items that were once personal property that have been attached to and permanently affixed to the real property, making it a part of the real estate. Like your kitchen sink, like your chandelier, like your toilet bowl, right? You wouldn't take your toilet bowl with you when you move, would you? I remember one of the last classes that I taught before we started teaching remotely online here. I had a lady that said, I'm taking my toilet when I move. The whole class like shot a look at her like, what the hell's wrong with this lady? She's like, I'm going to take my toilet bowl with me when I move. And we were all looking at her like, what? That's so weird. And she proceeded to explain and had a very good explanation for it, actually. I would have never thought of it. She said, listen, I'm a tall lady, and my husband's even taller than me. She's like, you know how hard it is to sit on you little people toilets? It's like you sitting on a little kiddie toilet. She said, it's hard to find tall toilets for tall people to sit on. She's like, so when I move, we're taking our toilets with us. And I was like, you know what? That's actually a pretty good excuse. That's a pretty good explanation. I wouldn't have even thought of that. But you can't leave the pipe exposed and just the sewer gas is able to come out from that where the toilet is. You'd have to replace it with another toilet. You know, she's like, yeah, I'll do that, but I'm taking my toilet with me when I move. And I was like, yeah, I guess there's nothing wrong with that as long as you disclose that before buyers come and make an offer on your property. Because what if that buyer's tall too? And that was a selling feature for them too, how tall your toilets were. You know? And she's like, I can do that. I was like, so as long as everybody's has the understanding of what's going on here, it's perfectly fine. You know, even though the toilet bowl is a fixture, it's considered part of the real estate. If you let the other party know you're taking it with you when you leave, as long as you replace it with something else, it's perfectly fine. That's like chandelier.
I was gonna say the same thing with lights. You have to, if you take your lights with you, you have to just put something else in.
Correct. And that's common. That's why I brought up chandeliers, because chandeliers, sometimes they can be very expensive. And, you know, people are like, oh, no. I'm not leaving that chandelier behind. I'm taking that with me, you know. Yeah, but you can't just leave the wires exposed there. You know, you have to replace it with something else, you know, or sconce lighting. You know, that's like the fancy lighting that sticks out of the wall, you know, that same thing with that. If that's why when you're meeting with a property owner to list their property for sale, ask them, what are you taking with you and what are you leaving behind? Like, do you have any chandeliers or sconce lighting you're taking with you, or something custom that's actually part of the real estate, but you're planning on removing it and taking it with you? If that's the case, you're going to have to replace it with something else. You can't leave you can't take the toilet bowl and just leave the pipe exposed. You can't take a chandelier, just leave live wires hanging from the ceiling. You know, you have to replace it with something. As long as you
they take their refrigerators too.
Yeah, well, refrigerator, it's refrigerator is considered personal property, unless you get custom refrigerators. They look like they're part of the paneling in the wall because they're built into the wall. That's different. That's custom, you know. That you would assume that the refrigerator is part of the real estate. Even though refrigerators are usually personal property, that one could lead to an argument. So we, as the real estate agent, we have experience with this stuff now. Now I'm teaching you about my experiences. We have experiences with this, that refrigerators are personal property. However, if it looks like it's custom built into there and designed as part of the kitchen, it could be construed as part of the real estate. So you need to disclose to buyers if you're taking that with you or not. Now, washing machine and dryer, that's personal property. You take that with you. A buyer can always ask if it could be included in the sale, but otherwise it's assumed the seller takes it with them, just like their bed and their dresser. right? So that's our job, to try to make this transaction as smooth as possible and ask all those questions and when we're getting a listing. Now, trade fixtures, they're considered personal property, installed and used for business purposes by a tenant, and they can be removed before the lease expires. Otherwise, it becomes a fixture, which is part of the real estate. Like a barber's chair that's bolted to the floor, not those ones that just sit on the floor, but the ones that are bolted in. Gas station pumps, shelving in supermarkets and stores, sinks in a beauty salon. They're actually attached to the plumbing, but they got that cut out for your neck to put down. They're business fixtures. They're personal property. And the salon owner can take it with them when they move out, as long as they remove it before the lease expires. Now, they can't just leave the exposed pipes there either. They got to leave it the way they found it. If those plumbing was not there before, you know, they got to cap them off behind the walls and leave it like it was. Okay, anybody got a screenshot that needed it? All right, so let's highlight that stuff now. Implements on page 98. Implements are annual crops like wheat, corn, and garden vegetables, and are considered personal property. In the paragraph below it, I put a bracket here and said should know. We went over this in earlier chapters. You know, like, can we help people sell mobile homes? Yes. As long as they're not new, we're allowed to broker the resale of mobile homes. And if they're, unless, by just going to motor vehicle and doing it through the title work. Otherwise, if the axles are removed and it's mounted to a foundation, then it's sold just like any house would be sold, part of the real estate. Okay. All right, here we could do the highlights about fixtures and trade fixtures. Also page 98. We're almost done with this chapter. Let's just finish it up. I know we're past 4:30 now. So let's just finish this up real quick and we could be done with this chapter. If you don't mind. Okay, good. Here's just my slide explaining fixture, trade fixture, and legal tests of determining whether something is a fixture or not. Which these tests are not that clear because not all judges rule the same. It could be an argument. So we as real estate agents should always ask people, what are you taking with you and what are you leaving behind? What about the keys to the house? Are those a fixture, part of the real estate, or are they personal property? The keys to the front door? They're actually part of the real estate. They go with the lock in the front door. You cannot hold the keys hostage and sell them for extra money to the owner that's buying the property, right? That's like the garage door opener. If you got an electric garage door opener, the remote control, you can't hold them hostage to sell them for an extra 35 or 50 bucks. You know, they go with the the opener. What about a carpet? You know, a throw carpet? Is that personal property or part of the real estate?
Personal.
It's personal. What about wall-to-wall carpeting? You know, the kind that's nailed down or tacked down at all the edges and it's cut to the shape of the room? Is that
I would
personal
think part of
property?
the real estate, part of the real estate.
Okay, yeah. Well, you guys got common sense, but do you know that people actually argued this and went to court over it? And some judges said that wall-to-wall carpeting can be considered personal property that you could take with you. People will argue over, people are so petty, they'll argue over the stupidest things. So, or be cheap. Never underestimate the cheapness of people, you know? So always ask the owner when selling the property if they're leaving it behind or what are they taking with them. If they say the carpet, you should have a heart-to-heart talk with them and say, no, leave that behind. What are you doing? All right. So legal tests of the fixture. Okay, we should always do the final walkthrough the day of the closing on the way to the closing. And I'm just giving you another personal piece of advice here. We do walkthroughs when we go get the listing. We look at the house. We do walkthroughs when people get home inspections, when they get appraisals. We go through the house a lot of times, right? So here's a bunch of times when we get city inspections, we do walkthroughs. But the final walkthrough is just to make sure that the seller moved all their crap out of the house and they're not leaving piles of garbage or broken furniture or anything like that behind when they leave before the closing. Usually people move all their stuff out before the closing day, you know. So in the past, I've always done my final walkthroughs sometimes a week before the closing. But I learned a lesson that I don't do that no more. And even though it's a major pain in the butt, I always do my walkthroughs on the day of closing. Before I go to the closing, we go to the house and do the final walkthrough then. Because I had an instance once where we did a final walkthrough the evening before the closing, just the evening before. And the next morning we had the closing. And I got a call from the listing real estate agent. She asked me if I could stop by the house and pick up the lockbox for her. If she gave me the shackle code that I could take it off the door and bring it to the closing for her because it was closer to me and out of her way. I was like, yeah, I could do you a solid. I could do that for you. So I did that, but had to run to the bathroom really quick. So I used the key, went inside really quick, did a quick run around again, and then I went to the closing. I gave her lockbox, and then the attorneys were asking the buyer, did you guys have a chance to do your final walkthrough? Was everything okay? They were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, we got a problem. I just came from the house. Remember that beautiful, gorgeous, high-end kitchen that was there? This was an expensive home, but a beautiful high-end kitchen. But the guy was doing a short sale. He hasn't made a mortgage payment on the house in like the last 5 years. And we were doing a short sale. She was buying it through, my clients were buying it through a short sale. And he literally stripped out the kitchen. He literally took the kitchen sink. There was nothing left. He took the cabinets off the wall, the custom 42-inch cherry cabinets. He took the kitchen sink, or all you saw was the exposed pipe sticking out of the floor and the wall. He took the very expensive high-end appliances that were supposed to be included in his sale. He took those Viking appliances. You guys are familiar with the brand name Viking? Expensive stuff, we ended up negotiating that he had to bring back those appliances. I told him, you keep the cabinets, because there was granite cabinets. He had to have a whole crew of people come in there and take it out. He took out, they had granite countertops on top of those cabinets. So I don't know if he cracked them or did damage to them. So I was like, you know what? You keep the cabinets and the granite countertops, the sink and all that. Just bring back the dishwasher, the refrigerator, the hood, and I think, and the stove. They were all Viking appliances. I said, you bring those things back. As long as they still work, they're not damaged or dented up. You're going to pay my clients money to get new cabinets and to have them installed, because you robbed them, basically. But now, if I didn't do that final walkthrough and run in there really quick, she didn't ask me to do that with the lockbox, my clients would have went to closing. They're now the owners of the house. They go all happy, excited to go see their beautiful new home to live in. Call the cops. You've been robbed. You got to make an insurance claim because the kitchen is gone. Thank God I caught it. So I had to get that guy to come back, bring that stuff, and give them a check for money for replacing the kitchen, rebuilding the kitchen. It's crazy.
So he did that in between the night and the morning of the closing?
Yep. We had to get a whole crew. We had to have a whole crew of people, like as soon as we left, had a whole crew of people in there disassembling it. You know, because I mean, that had to have taken time, you know? It's crazy. All right. And we already went over this slide, title, deed, recording of documents, what are the four evidences of title? Let me try to get through this so we can finish this chapter. We're done. So let's just do the key terms to review, and then we're out for the weekend. Sorry for going over time like this, but let's try to get through it quick then. The wearing away of land usually due to the actions of wind or water.
Erosion.
Erosion, 10 is A. Anything that can be inherited is called, kind of sounds like inherit.
Hereditament? Hereditament?
12 is B. Once personal property, now real estate. What do you call an item that was once personal property, but now you attached it to the real estate? It's become part of the real estate.
Picture.
Fixture.
11 is C. Rights of landowners to use the waters adjoining streams or waterways not affected by tidal currents.
Riparian rights.
13 is D, riparian right. Sudden change of a course of a stream.
Avulsion.
4 is E, of tangible personal property.
Chattel.
Chattels.
Which one? Oh, chattels.
Chattels. Solid material deposited by a body of water. You know, the dirt, sand, rocks.
Alluvian.
Alluvian, 3 is G, correct. An increase of land caused by the gradual depositing of solid material by the actions of the water.
Accretion.
Yes, accretion. 1 is H. Another word for tangible.
Corporeal.
Corporeal, correct. 7 is I. Rights of landowners to use bodies of water affected by tidal currents. There are navigable waters, high tide, low tide.
Littoral rights.
Littoral rights, 5 is J. 5 is J. Belonging to the owner of the land below. Think about this one for a second. If the land is below, what is it? Air rights, 2 is K. Annual crops are referred to as
Emblements.
emblements, 9 is L, and they're considered personal property. Leave real estate to someone by will.
Device.
Devise, 8 is M. Okay. Let's go down to key terms 2. And next to letter C, at the end of the line, where it says removable by tenants, write in commercial property. In commercial property. And then after letter J, write W slash, for like the abbreviation for with legally defined boundaries. Or you could write with legally defined boundaries. after letter J. Right? The earth, including the air above. Key terms 2. The earth, including the air above. The air is above. What's below?
Land.
Land.
Land. 2 is A. That's the way you got to ask yourself a question about these things. Ask yourself a question about the question. Land improvement and bundle of rights.
Real estate.
Real estate, 6 is B. Removable by tenants in commercial property.
Real property.
No.
Oh, trade fixture.
Trade fixture.
Fixtures, 10 is
Trade
C.
fixtures.
Yes, 10 is C. Trade fixtures. Subsurface rights,
Mineral rights.
3 is D. Now it's our English class. A synonym for real estate. It's real property or realty. Huh?
Real property. Real.
Yeah, 7 is E. This isn't an English class. I'm not going to be giving you that. Okay. Creation of dry land by the gradual withdrawal of water.
Relics.
Yeah, reliction. 8 is F. Everything that is not real property is
Personal property.
personal property. 5 is G, because there's only 2 kinds of property on this planet, right? Real or personal. So 5 is G. Intangible, another word for intangible.
Incorporeal.
Incorporeal, correct. Incorporeal, 1 is H. Ownership of minerals, oil, and so on.
Subsurface rights.
9 is I, subsurface rights. And specific tract of land with legally defined boundaries.
Parcel.
That's the definition of parcel. 4 is J. And that concludes chapter 5. So